Good morning, Ohio State fans. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Tuesday, November 4th. I am joined by our returning film guru at 11 Warriors, Mr. Kyle Jones. I would ask you, Mr. Jones, if you're, exhilarated coming out of that classic Bears victory yesterday, as much as I hate to talk up Caleb Williams and a Michigan tight end at the end of the game. Although I would imagine the Cincinnati Bengals fans that are listening to this would probably, they're probably tired of hearing about it. But did you enjoy it?
Oh, it was incredibly stupid and very drunk and entertaining as all hell. And I mean, yeah, my guys came out on top, but I don't think that's a game that you can necessarily beat your chest either way. And to the Bengals fans, like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you. That is tough, tough.
It's a shame we're not going to get a Bengals versus Cowboys or Commanders game this year, because I would imagine the over-under on that would probably be lined somewhere in the 70s or 80s. And it's certainly
170,
okay.
180. Yeah.
So I'm not even ambitious enough with it then, I guess. Well, this is, much as we love to talk about the NFL, and I had between the Bears and the Steelers, getting a win. Hey, the Steelers could beat anybody on Sunday, evidently, and lose to anybody on Thursday. So I had a pretty good weekend as an NFL fan. But this is a college football show first and foremost. Even as much as we'd love to give praise to our Buckeyes that have gone to the professional ranks, we've got a team currently in Columbus to worry about and talk about and rejoice about, because they are coming off yet another very impressive victory, one that was highly sought after, anticipated, coveted, and delivered on relative to the return of Jim Knowles to Columbus, which I'm sure you're excited to break down, Mr. Jones, on Film Study this week, which will drop on Thursday afternoon. So make sure you are subscribed to the 11 Warriors YouTube channel so that you will get that right when it comes out. We are going to get first into how Matt Patricia shut down this team. But before we get into that, we do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor at the 11 Dubcast and 11 Warriors this Ohio State football season. That would be First Bank of Central Ohio. From game day to work day, First Bank of Central Ohio is proud to support the business owners that keep Central Ohio thriving. They're locally owned, business focused, and always in your corner. Give them a visit at fbcentralohio.com. So, as I alluded to off the top, Mr. Jones, everybody coming in this game, it was a big talking point on the Dubcast last week. Just about every time I spoke to Dan was, we know there's a documented history of Ryan Day being petty, going back to the dispute, and we didn't even bring this up initially, but going back to the dispute that happened with Loxley over at Maryland regarding Chase Young and his eligibility in 2019. Ryan Day said, okay, if you're going to nuke this guy's Heisman campaign, we're going to come right back and nuke you on the field outright. That's exactly what happened in that case. Obviously, there was the whole Hang 100 episode. And then during the week, Ryan Day acknowledged as much that, it was hard not to feel some type of ways about not only the circumstances under which Jim Knowles left to go to Penn State, but also the fact that Penn State is in the same conference as Ohio State, took the same job to go to not a rival just across the way in what used to be the same division of the Big Ten. It's hard not to imagine that Day wanted to make a point, and he certainly did that. And Julian saying, he gave him all the tools he needed to succeed and the opportunities to go out and sling the rock, the pill, if you will. And we'll get into that in the second half of the show. But the less heralded and spoken about, the other side of this coin, if you will, is that Jim Knowles departing creates an opportunity for Matt Patricia to come in. And if you want to blow out a team, it's one thing to score more points than them, but you really got to shut them down offensively. And there was going to be a case for Penn State to stay in this game if they were able to lean on Katron Allen, which is something they clearly indicated they wanted to do in wake of the Drew Aller injury. They gave him the ball nearly 30 times against Iowa in a game they only ended up losing by 1 point. They really tried to keep him involved as much as possible early. First play of the game in this one actually ended up being, I think, a more than 20-yard gain for Mr. Allen. So it was kind of got off to a shaky start for the defense, but their mantra all season has been bend, don't break, even going back to the Jim Knowles era or the last season of it last season. And it seemed like that continued to, be the case in this game. Probably would have held them to single digits again, were it not for the CJ Donaldson fumble at the end of the half. So given that this was the less owned in and examined matchup, the Ohio State defense relative to the Penn State offense in terms of what Buckeye fans were kind of most intrigued about going into this game. I'm curious what you saw that Patricia did to anticipate what Penn State wanted to do, given it seemed kind of obvious who they were going to need to lean on to win, and they were able to keep it close early. But what did Ohio State ultimately do to keep them from scoring in the second half and shut down anything the Nittany Lions could have had success with on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, it was a fun matchup to watch because I think Kotelnicki did a really nice job of designing leverage for his offense. And what I mean by that is he was using formations, and like there were way more formations, like unbalanced looks and extra linemen here and a guy there. Like the very first play of the game, people probably don't remember this, but like, Nick Singleton takes a pitch around the left side for by like 25 yards. Everyone's going, wait, what's going on? This doesn't happen. Well, Penn
Oh, I
State
thought it was Allen. It was Nick Singleton.
it was Nick Singleton.
All
Yeah,
right.
I'm pretty
Okay.
sure.
Forgive me.
But like, it might have been Allen, but regardless, take a pitch 25 yards. There were 7 offensive linemen, and they had they had their starting left tackle and their left guard lined up as like wings out in the slot to like basically just be extra blockers. And then they just didn't block half of Ohio State's defense on the backside. They were like, cool, we don't care. We're running this side. You don't have enough bodies. And so we saw stuff like that throughout the whole game where you'd go, wait, this isn't how a team lines up. Like they don't do this. Like, why are you trying this? And yet they were fine. They weren't all working. There's the double flea flicker that turned into a 15-yard sack. Ohio State's defense is just sitting there flat footed going, cool, we're just going to stay in this zone. We don't care. Like, you can keep running side to side. We're more worried about you coming forward. And that's great. And I think ultimately that's what you saw from this defense was they didn't try to do too much. I think they started to simplify and recognize what were the adjustments that needed to be made. I think what we saw from that penny front, so we've talked a lot about, it's that like 5-man front where they've got Arvell Reese as a stand-up defensive end. They've got, the 2 tackles, Caden McDonald's on the nose, and that's great. And it was still very effective in some situations. But I think Kotelnicki was like, cool, if you sit in that look, we're just going to go hit the edges because you've got all this mass in between the, inside. We're just going to go outside. We're going to throw screen passes. We're going to run jet sweeps. We're going to run this, all this kind of stuff and just go attack your edges and do things to kind of get you out of alignment. And so Ohio State said, cool, we're going to run less of that kind of compressed, condensed stuff. And just basically, to your point, keep the umbrella on the defense, right? Keep everything in front of you, rally, make tackles, don't get too aggressive. And it was really, in my opinion, it was about winning second down. You hear all the time about winning third down. For me, it was so much about winning second. Those were the most interesting play calls because they were going to scheme up a way to get 3, 4, 5 yards on first down. So you'd have these 2nd and 5s. And what you wanted to avoid was getting into 3rd and 1, because if you got into 3rd and 1, then they can do more of, and we saw it, Penn State can do more of this goofy 7-man lineman wildcat, 2 running backs, all this, that, and the other, all the trickeration. If you get them into the 3rd and long and to a true just drop back passing situation, Ohio State had a massive advantage and they could just start to blitz a young quarterback. I actually thought Grunkemeyer played pretty well given the circumstances. Like, he made a couple throws.
Better than the Iowa game for sure.
For sure. I mean, he made, especially in the second half, he made a couple throws, and like, they didn't ask him to do a lot. And also, we all know they don't have just the passing game in general to do a lot. And so when you got into if you could win second down and create a 3rd and long, Ohio State just had the advantage. And that's really what it came down to was, when you got into 3rd and long, then you can bring the blitz packages. Then you can really disguise the coverage. Then you can send a corner, in pressure and do all this kind of fun stuff that Penn State really just is not equipped for offensively to handle. But if you get, if you give up a play on 2nd and 5 and now you're in 3rd and 1, Penn State's, this is what they live for. And so I think that was the real fun cat and mouse was not that 1st and 10. It was really that 2nd and 6, 2nd and 7. I think as the game went on, Ohio State started really doing a lot more to win those downs. They weren't necessarily trying to be over aggressive. It was make them go sideways, don't let them get a ton of yards. And that ended up working out for Ohio State.
So it's interesting you bring that up because I noticed that there were a lot of Penn State fans after the game that were very critical of their own offensive play calling, given those jumbo overload put 7 blockers on the field, put a trips formation out, and the receiver that's lined up off the line of scrimmage is actually just another offensive lineman. That was the kind of play that they scored their second touchdown on right before the end of the first half, and then they almost never really went back to it again. And a lot of people were wondering, why didn't they try to keep running that in the second half when it was clearly their most success they were having on offense, and Ohio State was struggling to adjust to it. But I guess what you're saying is that it was really more of a product of Ohio State putting them in a position relative to downs and distance where they couldn't afford to be running those types of formations. Is that right?
Yeah, and that play you're talking about, that extra line, it's the exact same play they ran on the first play of the game. They is exact same one. And you're right. They ran on the first play for 25 yards. They had another run on that touchdown drive that, Singleton, I know, was he had a big gain on it, and then that touchdown was the same play. And the
I
reason
know
they
that
stopped,
one was Singleton for sure.
yeah, that one was Singleton for sure. But that concept, they ran the exact same play to the left side, like they did the exact same thing 3 times in a row. And when they came out in that formation a fourth time, Ohio State they audibled out. And they got into like kind of like a base nickel look, and they were able to overload and do all that Ohio State didn't stay as rigid, right? Like I think that's the only criticism you can really make about Matt Patricia's defense this year is like he's doing a lot of interesting stuff with the fronts, but there's a level of rigidity to what you can do there, right? When you put Cade McDonald on the nose, like he's lined up over the center. Like he's not going anywhere else. Like there's nowhere to shift. Like he's just there. And so like you start doing that and you say, I'm going to cover the center and the 2 guards. Well, there's 3 of your 11 guys are right there. And that's great if they're going to run the ball up the middle. But if they do anything else, those 3 guys might not be involved. And so I think like that was what Ohio State said. Okay, let's make sure we've got some flexibility and some answers baked in. And we started to see those as the game went on.
I do want to touch on the offense because I know you're going to be talking about that in the second half of your video Thursday. But I got to ask you one last question about the defense as the ultimate Caleb Downs truther. Were you surprised that his targeting call was reversed at the end of the game?
I mean, I don't know how targeting works. Just like everybody else. Like I guess like Mike Pereira says it shouldn't have been. So I guess it shouldn't have been. Now I will say, and it pains me to do it, but I will show a point. I have a clip to show I'm unbiased. I got the play where he just gets beat around the corner. Caleb, there's it's a Singleton, jet motion, and they've got the guys. It's just, it's Caleb versus Singleton. Singleton beats him to the spot. It hurt me. It hurts me. It breaks my heart. But you know what? The next drive he came back, and actually it's a good point because one of the other fun schematic things that I won't talk about in the video, but we're seeing a ton of is Penn State runs a lot of motion. And what you would see is they would have a motion guy go across the field. And when that guy goes across the field, if Caleb had him, Caleb's just going to blitz. He's not going to follow him. He's just going to go blitz. And he probably blew up 2 or 3 plays in the backfield just doing that. And like, I think that's one of those things where not every player on the defense gets to do that. But they say, Caleb, if your guy goes in motion, go ahead. We're giving you the green light because we trust that you're going to make the play in the backfield. So I don't know if it's a green light, but it looks like it might be.
Yeah, I'm glad he's not going to miss the first half against Purdue. I'll put it that way. Although, I'll be honest, I expected it to be upheld if for no other reason that it seems like Ohio State comes out on the wrong end of those targeting reviews every single time. So it was nice to see them, get one, especially that wasn't really going to be super consequential in garbage time. Offensively, obviously, people were looking much more forward to this, as I alluded to off the top, given it was the Jim Knowles revenge narrative, but there was still that element of, okay, we did see Sayin throw the ball 42 times against Wisconsin, so it seems like Ohio State is starting to ramp up. when I asked you last week if you thought that was going to be a continued trend, you did say that, yeah, you thought that this was, and other people working at 11 Warriors agreed with you that we were going to see a more aggressive attack and kind of Julian Sand unleashed, if you will, than we had really seen, in the earlier part of the season. But there was still that part of, they're probably not going to play another ranked team, or at least a team that is going to be lined within maybe 20 points of them until Michigan at this point. So do they go back to the old conservative routine? Do they keep trying to figure out what to do with the running game and fit square pegs into round holes? Or are they going to really, let their freak flag fly relative to the passing game? And it seems like we got more of that, what we wanted to see in this one. Sand only misses on 3 passes. It might have been probably, other than the Minnesota game, this was probably the best dynamic duo performance from both Smith and Carnell Tate. And Bo Jackson quietly got over 100 yards rushing. A lot of it was fueled by a 50-plus yard gain he had in the fourth quarter. But even if you take that away, I mean, he still had a pretty solid game, at least relative to the other Ohio State rushers otherwise. I assume you're probably going to mostly focus on Sand in the video, or at least what Ryan Day did to kind of scheme it up for him. But I guess if you had to put it there, let me keep it simple then. We're kind of getting to the point now where if it wasn't for, all of the concentration of touchdowns that Jeremiah Smith had relative to Carnell Tate's quietly been kind of outgaining him in a lot of these games relative to yards and reception totals. People have been saying both of these guys are wide receiver ones at this point for a while, but is there a case right now that Tate might actually be playing a little bit better than Smith? And I guess if you could put it into words, just how much easier it is for both. Which guy do you think benefits from the other being on the field?
Both.
Given that both of them are just so talented, it really does feel like another Olave Garrett Wilson situation. But I'm curious which one you think is better effect for the other.
I mean, they both benefit, and I think, coming into this year, I've been wondering if this was going to be a similar to Marv's year 2 years ago, right, where it was so obvious who the number one guy was, and he was drawing double coverage, and Ibuka was, dinged up for a lot of that year, and so you kind of had this question of, is Julian Fleming going to draw enough coverage away, right? Or is Cade Stover going to do enough to turn the defense? And the answer was no, right? Like those guys weren't going to do it. And I think this game, to answer your question, I can show you a clip of either guy drawing double coverage, which opens up the other one on one of those deep plays, right? Like I think there were 4 long balls in this game. They each had a couple of, or maybe it was 3, 2 to Tate, 1 to Smith. But the 2 to Tate, I can show you how the opposite side, the free safety is rolling over to help and cover off Jeremiah Smith. And that leaves Carnell one-on-one against the safety, right? On both of his deep balls. That's exactly what happened. He was one-on-one versus safety. He wins. Sorry, there's not a safety in America, Caleb Downs included, that's going to win that battle. And you know how I feel about 2. And then on the opposite side, there was a concept where they schemed it up where they had Carnell as the opposite. He was the lone receiver, and they had Smith kind of bunched up in a set on the opposite side. And that meant that, that's the opposite of how they normally do it. So the defense is rolling over to the single receiver side because they didn't want to leave that corner on an island. And that meant Jeremiah got a safety one-on-one. Guess who's going to win that battle, right? And like the most important thing is you need a guy that can get it there, of course. Like there's a lot of receivers that are open on routes like that every game that we don't see because quarterback won't throw it. That's not an issue anymore for Ohio State. I don't think there's any question about Ten's ability to deliver those deep balls, because I think the first one, the touchdown to Tate, was a little underthrown, but I think he couldn't step all the way into it. The other 2 were just gorgeous, like right on the hands, perfect throws. And so to answer your question, they're both drawing it. Now, the thing that I'm going to dig into this week on the video is really how I don't think that this was necessarily meant to be a like, screw you, Jim Knowles, I'm coming after, I'm dropping the hammer. Like I didn't really get that vibe from the game plan. I think it was, hey, we know what they're going to do. We know this guy. We know his schemes. There was there was motion, like a pre-snap shift or motion, I think on 80%, just estimating, of snaps for Ohio State. And the reason you do that is to get the defense to check into something, which means they know what Knowles is going to have them check into when they start in one look and get into another look. They know what they're going to get defensively. Like they're doing that on purpose to say, okay, if we start this way and the safety moves over here, we know what the play is, right? You know, I think Ohio State fans know what can happen when one team knows what the other team is doing, right? Right? We know we know how that can help and what an advantage that
I
can
don't know
be.
what you could possibly be referring to.
Right. You know what an advantage can be, but this is a way to essentially say, like, hey, we know we can see when they start in 4x1 and then they motion the guy back across, we're going to get this from Jim, right? You know, like they had this motion they ran a bunch of times. It drove me crazy until I figured out what they were doing. They just had the tight ends, Kazmarek and Claire, shift literally to the opposite side. And I was like, why in the world would you have the tight ends both tight ends flop? I've never seen that before. And it was just like one indicator to know, like, are they manning up or are they not? That's it. And like, that's the kind of stuff that you could see that, like, unless you really know this other team, you're not going to waste your time doing it because you're really kind of like guessing. You're just throwing darts, right? Blindly. And in this case, we know what we're getting here. And so because we know, we can be confident in that when they do this, we're going to get 4, you know, like the clip that's getting shared around of, like, you can hear Ryan Day saying, got him, before Tate's, you know, he's hit his 5th step on the route. And Ryan Day knows. Ryan Day is not like hoping that he's got it. He knows. He's like, we got it. This is the call. We've got the right guy. We've got the right look. We've got this whole thing. So I don't necessarily think that this is as much of a screw you for leaving as it was like, hey, when we know we know what we're getting. Because I think typically Ohio State gets the tendency breakers, right? Everybody saves their best stuff, their change ups, all their counters for Ohio State. And I think this is what happens when you get a team where Ohio State goes, well, we've got the leg up here because we know what you're doing. And this is what can happen.
You just had to dump the bucket of cold water on the Jim Knowles revenge narrative, didn't you? Huh? We can't have any fun around.
I mean,
here.
I think it still worked. I mean, I don't think he felt great coming out of the stadium.
No, I can't imagine any DC that gives up almost 500 total yards of offense, or even a 100-yard rusher to this rushing attack this year, given how things have gone for the ground game to this point of the season. I can't imagine Knowles walked out of Columbus feeling any better than he did the last time he left Columbus, certainly. But yeah, that's all great stuff. And after film study was off for last week, we gave Jones graciously a well-deserved bye after Ohio State's own bye. I'm sure that everybody will be looking forward to having it back this week. I will say one last comment relative to what you just said about Day, you know, kind of doing the call and his shot thing. I think it's funny that you don't normally see a lot of coaches do that, because every time that the biggest instance of that sticks out in my mind was when Lane Kiffin signaled touchdown in
100%.
It was against Ohio. I can't remember what bowl game it was, but it was when Alabama played OSU in the first playoff, and I believe it was Von Bell intercepted the pass when Kiffin preemptively signaled touchdown. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think Day was quite in the picture yet relative to Ohio State football, but I would hope that he doesn't make a regular habit of that, because that can certainly invite an egg on your face opportunity, as it did for Mr. Kiffin. But now he's in line for half the head coaching jobs in the SEC this
He's
going
to coach the entire league next year. It's incredible.
That's what I hear.
I can't wait to see how he does it, but it's gonna be fun to watch no matter what.
It depends on how many more tee times get canceled for coaches around the conference. But I'm sure some more dominoes will fall into place as we get down the home stretch of the season. In any event, Jones, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Again, film study comes out Thursday. Probably one of, if not the most anticipated video content on this channel. I'm sure everybody will be looking forward to see what you have in store for the Ohio State faithful this coming Thursday. So thank you for giving us a little preview once again on the Dubcast, as you have all season. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks to our sponsor, First Bank of Central Ohio. We'll be back with Dan Hope tomorrow, Wednesday morning, to react to the first set of the college football playoff rankings. will Ohio State hold their top spot, or will Kurt Signetti's and the rise of the Hoosiers finally establish it? So will they finally overtake Ohio State, hopefully only for a month before these two ideally inevitably meet in the Big Ten championship? We'll finally get our answers to the first part of that question Tuesday night. It'll be interesting to see. But yeah, make sure you come back tomorrow morning. And thanks again to Jones for joining us. And we'll see you then. Look forward to talking to you soon. Take care, folks.